Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're going on a fascinating journey exploring how America's shale revolution is impacting global order. We'll be diving deep into Peter Zeihan's book, The Absent Superpower, to unpack this complex issue. Trust me, you might be surprised by some of the ripple effects this energy boom is creating across the globe.
It's a topic that touches every aspect of our lives, from the gas we put in our cars to the geopolitical alliances that shape the world.
Exactly. And before we get too deep into the geopolitical weeds, I want to start with something we can all relate to. Have you ever stopped to think about just how many things in our daily lives are made from petroleum? It's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. It's not just about the gas in our cars. We're talking everything from the clothes we wear to the electronics we use. Even our food supply relies on it.
It's a fundamental building block of modern society.
Absolutely. But what happens when the world's energy markets experience a major shakeup? Because that's precisely what's been happening, thanks to America's shale revolution.
Yeah.
We've gone from being a major oil importer to a leading global producer, and it's totally changing the game.
It's fascinating how quickly this shift happened. Just a few decades ago, the U.S. was heavily reliant on foreign oil. But thanks to advancements in shale oil and natural gas extraction, we've witnessed a dramatic reversal of that dependence.
It reminds me of Spindletop, that iconic Texas oil gusher from the early 1900s that launched the oil boom. But this time, it feels different, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What sets the shale revolution apart is the technological innovation behind it. We're not just talking about finding new oil fields. We're talking about unlocking resources that were previously inaccessible.
And I read that microseismic imaging and multi-stage fracking were instrumental in this. Can you explain a bit more about those techniques?
Microseismic imaging is like giving geologists X-ray vision. It allows them to see deep underground and pinpoint oil and gas deposits with incredible accuracy. And multi-stage fracking takes it a step further. Instead of just fracturing the rock once, they can now create multiple fractures along a horizontal wellbore, dramatically increasing the amount of oil and gas that can be extracted. These innovations have made U.S. shale production incredibly efficient.
So that's how the U.S. managed to ramp up production so quickly. But I understand there's also something called a frac log that could further disrupt things.
Yes, the frac log refers to a backlog of drilled but uncompleted wells. You see, in shale production, drilling the well is only the first step. The well then needs to be fracked and prepped for production. Due to economic factors, many companies have drilled wells but are holding off on completing them, waiting for optimal market conditions. This means there's a huge potential surge in production waiting in the wings, ready to be unleashed when the time is right.
It's like a coiled spring, just waiting to release even more energy onto the market. And speaking of a glut of energy, I can't help but think about those satellite images showing vast shale fields lit up at night by all the flared natural gas. It's an incredible sight, but it also makes me wonder why so much is being burned off.
That's a great observation, and it highlights a key challenge with natural gas transportation. Unlike oil, which can be transported relatively easily via pipelines or tankers, natural gas requires specialized infrastructure. Building pipelines is expensive and time-consuming, and the U.S. currently lacks the capacity to utilize all the natural gas it's producing from shale.
So we have this abundance of natural gas, yet we struggle to harness its full potential. What are the implications of this natural gas surplus, both economically and strategically?
Well, it means the U.S. is sitting on a massive untapped resource. This cheap, abundant natural gas could be used to power homes, businesses, and even replace coal in electricity generation, leading to lower energy costs and a cleaner environment. Strategically, it's a bargaining chip, allowing the U.S. to potentially export more liquefied natural gas, LNG, to allies around the world.
So this shale revolution isn't just about energy independence, it's reshaping America's global position. But how do you think other major players in the energy market, who've traditionally held the power, are reacting to this shift?
Let's start with Saudi Arabia. A few years back, they launched a price war, flooding the market with cheap oil in an attempt to cripple U.S. shale production and regain their dominance. However, this strategy backfired spectacularly.
What happened? I would have thought they could just outproduce and underprice the U.S.
They underestimated the resilience and ingenuity of American shale producers. These companies were able to adapt quickly, cutting costs and becoming even more efficient. The price war actually accelerated innovation in the U.S. shale industry. The Saudis unintentionally strengthened the very competitor they were trying to crush.
It's fascinating how quickly the energy landscape can change. But I'm also curious about how this impacts the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran, two countries that seem to be constantly at odds.
Their rivalry is deeply rooted in religious, political, and economic differences. They've long been vying for dominance in the Middle East, each trying to exert control over key resources and strategic waterways. But the U.S. shale boom has thrown a wrench into their power dynamic. As the U.S. reduces its dependence on Middle Eastern oil, it creates a power vacuum that both Saudi Arabia and Iran are eager to fill.
So the U.S. stepping back from the region is actually fueling the rivalry between these two countries.
Yes, and it's creating a dangerous situation. Remember those satellite images of shale fields lit up by flared gas? Well, imagine that same scene, but now those flares are visible in the Persian Gulf. The potential for conflict is escalating, and it could have global consequences.
That sounds ominous. What's happening in the Persian Gulf that has everyone so concerned?
Well, the Strait of Hormuz is a critical choke point for global oil transportation. A significant portion of the world's oil supply passes through this narrow waterway, and it's become a focal point for tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia, as well as other regional players.
So if conflict were to break out there, wouldn't that disrupt oil shipments and send shockwaves through the global economy?
Absolutely. Even a minor disruption in the Strait of Hormuz could send oil prices soaring, leading to economic instability worldwide. Zeihan even suggests the possibility of a tanker war where ships carrying oil become targets, further disrupting global trade and potentially drawing in other countries.
It's a stark reminder of how interconnected the world is. Actions in one region can have far-reaching consequences. But shifting gears a bit, I'm curious about how this new energy landscape is impacting Russia. They've always been a major energy player.
Russia is facing a unique set of challenges. They're grappling with a declining population, an economy overly reliant on energy exports, and now the shale revolution undercutting their influence. They're feeling the pressure, and Zeihan argues this could make them more prone to aggressive actions.
What kind of aggression are we talking about?
Zeihan uses the term twilight war to describe a scenario where Russia might try to secure resources and create buffer zones by expanding their influence in Eastern Europe. This could involve military actions against neighboring countries, potentially triggering a larger conflict that could even draw in NATO.
So the U.S. shale boom is indirectly increasing the risk of conflict in Europe. It's a sobering thought, but on a slightly different note. I'm also curious about this concept of dollar diplomacy that Zeihan talks about. It sounds like something out of a spy novel.
It does have a certain intrigue to it, doesn't it? In essence, dollar diplomacy refers to the U.S. using its economic and energy dominance to influence global affairs. It's not a new concept, we've seen it throughout history, but the shale revolution is giving it a new dimension.
Can you give us some specific examples of how this might play out?
Imagine the U.S. striking energy deals with countries in Southeast Asia, offering them access to our abundant and relatively cheap natural gas. These deals wouldn't just be about energy, they'd be about strengthening alliances and creating a network of countries aligned with American interests. It's a way for the U.S. to counter China's growing influence in the region.
So it's almost like a modern-day version of the Great Game with energy as the playing field.
That's a good analogy. And just like the Great Game, there are inherent risks. Using energy as a political tool can create resentment and instability, especially if it's perceived as a form of coercion.
It's a delicate balancing act, for sure. But there's another aspect of Zeihan's book that I found both fascinating and a bit unsettling: the rise of private military contractors.
That's another significant trend we're seeing in this new world order. As traditional power structures shift and global uncertainty increases, there's a growing demand for private security forces. Governments and corporations are increasingly turning to these groups to protect their interests in volatile regions.
It's almost like something out of a dystopian novel where corporations and wealthy individuals have their own private armies.
The lines are definitely blurring between state and non-state actors, and this creates a host of ethical and legal questions, especially when it comes to accountability and oversight. Who controls these private armies? To whom are they accountable?
It's a gray area with a lot of potential for things to go wrong. But zooming out a bit, we've covered a lot of ground. Saudi Arabia and Iran vying for dominance, a potential tanker war, Russia's twilight war, and the rise of dollar diplomacy and private armies. It can feel overwhelming trying to make sense of it all.
I think it's important to remember that these seemingly disparate events are all interconnected. They're driven by fundamental shifts in global power dynamics, largely fueled by the shale revolution and America's newfound energy independence. It's like a chain reaction, with each event setting off new ripples across the globe.
So the shale revolution isn't just about energy. It's about geopolitics, economics, and even the future of warfare. It's a lot to process, But before we wrap up our deep dive, I'd like to shift our focus to the individual. How do you think all these global shifts will impact the average person?
That's a question we all need to be asking ourselves. The ripple effects of these geopolitical shifts will eventually reach our shores, impacting everything from the cost of goods to job security to our sense of personal safety.
It's like we're on a ship navigating through uncharted waters, and we need to be prepared for the storms ahead. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been unpacking how America's shale revolution is reshaping global order. But let's bring things down to earth for a minute. How might these massive shifts impact our everyday lives?
It's easy to get lost in the grand geopolitical narratives, but these changes will eventually trickle down to all of us, impacting our wallets, our jobs, and even our sense of security.
So let's start with the economic implications. Energy prices seem to be on everyone's mind these days. How might the shale revolution and the resulting global instability affect things like the cost of gas or groceries?
Well, energy is a fundamental input for almost everything we consume. If the cost of energy goes up due to increased demand-supply disruptions or geopolitical maneuvering, the cost of everything else tends to follow. That means we could see higher prices at the pump, more expensive groceries, and increased costs for goods and services across the board.
That's certainly something we're already feeling, isn't it? But what about the impact on jobs? We've seen how the shale revolution created a boon in some sectors, but what about those who might be left behind?
The shift in energy production and global trade patterns will undoubtedly create winners and losers in the job market. Some industries, like those related to renewable energy or those benefiting from new trade deals, might see growth and job creation. However, others, like traditional energy industries or manufacturing sectors reliant on global supply chains, could face challenges and potential job losses.
It sounds like we need to be adaptable and prepared for a rapidly changing job market.
Yeah.
But beyond the economic concerns, are there social and political implications we should be aware of?
Absolutely. Zeihan highlights the rise of nationalism and populism as a key trend in this new world order. As the familiar structures of globalization erode and uncertainty grows, people tend to retreat into their national identities, seeking security and stability in a world that feels increasingly fragmented.
We've certainly seen this playing out in various countries around the world. But what are the potential consequences of this trend?
It can lead to a rejection of international cooperation, a focus on us versus them thinking, and a rise in protectionist policies. In some cases, it can even create fertile ground for authoritarian leaders who exploit these fears and divisions for their own gain.
So it's not just about economic competition or shifting alliances. It's about how these changes are shaping our societies, our values, and our political landscape. It feels like we're at a crossroads, doesn't it?
It does, and I think it's crucial for us to recognize that we have agency in shaping the future. We can either be swept along by the currents of change, reacting to events as they unfold, or we can actively participate in shaping the course of history.
That sounds empowering, but also a bit daunting. What can we as individuals do to navigate these turbulent times and contribute to a more positive future?
I believe it starts with awareness. We need to stay informed about the forces shaping our world and consider their potential impacts on our lives. Engage in thoughtful discussions with others, seeking out diverse perspectives and challenging our own assumptions.
That's what we're trying to do here on the Deep Dive, to equip you with the knowledge and insights you need to make sense of these complex issues and engage in meaningful conversations about the future.
And it's not just about talking. We need to take action. Support leaders and organizations working to build a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world. Volunteer your time, donate to the causes you believe in, and use your voice to advocate for positive change. Even small actions, when multiplied across millions of individuals, can have a profound impact.
It sounds like the message here is not to despair, but to embrace this moment of transformation as an opportunity to shape a better future.
Exactly. The shale revolution has set in motion a cascade of changes, creating challenges, but also opening up new possibilities. It's a time of uncertainty, but also a time of great potential. It's up to all of us to decide what kind of world we want to create out of the disorder.
That's a powerful and inspiring message. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the shale revolution and its far-reaching consequences. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey of exploration with you.
And remember, fellow deep divers, the exploration doesn't end here. Continue to question, to learn, and to engage with the world around you. The future is ours to shape. Until next time.